Once you've ruled out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Benton. It is vampirism, and there's a host of damned souls at Pelham House.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
He's dead. Can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hi everybody, this is Irene from the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show of the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And every time I say that now, I'm out of breath because I have to say it in one go. Otherwise, I just cannot get it out. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Irene. You know, it's all those years of smoking doing you in.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't smoke anymore. I haven't smoked now for 3 years.
I'm very impressed with that. Glad you quit.
Yeah. Yeah, so am I.
It's better on your lungs and your heart.
Well, I think it's a bit too late for that now, you know. It's more than likely on my lungs. That's why I got this crusty voice. Everyone thinks I'm bloody drunk. But it's not. It's because of the smoking, as I've said before. You know, I was a heavy smoker. I smoked for over 50 years, and it has affected my voice. Mind you, I can sing opera, and my voice is a vibrato.
A vibrato?
Vibrato. Yes, I got that in the voice.
I was told once I was a baritone.
Are you?
I don't know. I don't know enough about it.
Well, like a soprano. I'm joking. Right, now, I know I wasn't going to say anything about the weather in the UK this week, but it's been bucketing it down. We've had Storm Dennis, and all of Wales, or practically all of Wales, and the majority of England is flooded. So much destruction, it's unbelievable.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's really bad.
You know what? The one thing when we were talking with Whitley Strieber last week that I regret we didn't get a chance to cover, he had sent me a note saying, you know, we could talk about it, and then we got sidetracked, was about the weather and the climate change, because you know, he's written a couple of books on that, and you can definitely tell things are strange right now. I mean, here in the Northeast, as I mentioned, we still don't have any snow on the ground. It's been unusually warm. We're in mid-February right now. We should have like a couple feet of snow out there. We have nothing. And it's been cold, but not super cold like it normally is this time of year.
Yeah, we've had two named storms, 1 week apart from each other. The first one done enough damage and flooding. Now the second one, it's just finished the job off.
Oh, good Lord. Well, let's see what things look like as we get further. And knowing our luck, we're going to get clobbered in March with storms. That's happened to us before.
Oh, God, that means we're going to get it as well, because everything you get comes over our way.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. But they are blaming this on America, something to do with, there's a Gulf Stream over us at the moment, and something to do with the warm air out in America and everything, and meeting the cold air in the middle of the Atlantic has created the storms that we've been having. I don't know.
So in other words, it's Trump's fault.
Yeah.
Why not? Everything else is.
Mind you, Boris has had his hand in it as well.
Yeah, according to our press.
Yeah.
So
right.
We've had...
Anything else?
What's that?
Anything else?
Yeah. Yeah, if I sound a little bit down tonight, everyone, you know, it's been a rough week. We lost our dog this week, Dakota, he was 14 years old. He's been with us the last 2 years. We've taken care of him because his former owner couldn't take him with her when she moved. He was very, very lovable, but we've seen the last a couple of months, that he's just been getting worse and worse, and he finally passed away here at home Thursday morning. So we're still kind of reeling from it because he and I really bonded. In fact, I'm shocked at how quickly and how hard I fell in love with a dog in my life. And I've had dogs in my life. But for some reason, he and I, it was just such a strong bond. And, it was tough. What was that?
He was always beside you when you worked. He was there beside you on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, laying here. He'd hear my voice talking during the day. Yeah. It's a shame, but, we knew he was going to go. We hoped he would make it through Christmas, and he did. So, but he passed away peacefully, and we gave him lots of love and attention, so... Although I don't know if I told you that I think he made his presence known to me the other night over the weekend. We were driving, going out to dinner, my wife and I, and all of a sudden in the car, I smelled, for a brief moment, one of his farts. And I'm sorry for an old dog. He farted, and it had a particular odor. And I smelled it in the car very briefly, and I'm going, okay, he's letting us know he's still around.
What a way to do it as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was unique. I mean, how else is a dog going to tell you that they're around unless you see it? But the smell, oh yeah, that was very distinctive.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, that's nice. It really is nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you sure? I was going to say, are you sure it wasn't you?
No, mine has its own unique smell.
Perfumes, I know. But, you know it's him because of the smell.
Yeah, it's his way of maybe saying goodbye.
Yeah, calling you an old fart.
Yeah. Yeah, I get called that by you all the time.
Yeah, that's true. Well, let's hope he rests in peace, Dakota.
Yep. He's a good boy. He's out in the backyard.
If any dog's going to get his wings, it's going to be Dakota.
Yes. So, should we get on with the show here?
Okay, would you like to introduce our guest?
Well, certainly.
I love doing that.
Okay. Well, we have a very interesting guest tonight. I'm really looking forward to speaking with her. Our guest is Ellen Red, and she is a spiritual intuitive life coach. Ellen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Hello, Ellen.
Hello.
Sorry about our little banter there, but we do have to do it.
That was quite an interesting introduction. Thank you.
Our introductions usually are pretty interesting. We get a lot of comments on them.
It's the only way to get our stress out, So usually we're arguing or insulting each other, but today was Mark had a sad announcement with Dakota and one thing or another, but normally it's blooming havoc sometimes, but we can distress it. When he gets on my nerves, I get on his nerves, so we do it through the banter, don't we, Mark?
Hash it out.
Yes, we do. Like I usually come July, we like to I like to tease her about 4th of July and how we kicked her and her red coats out of the country.
And read the history books, boy. I'll read the history books.
She refers to it as Ungrateful Colonist Day.
That's funny.
Yeah, so that's usually how we go at each other. So anyway, let's get down to you, Ellen. Being a spiritual intuitive life coach, a little bit of a mouthful, and yet want to ask you a little bit about yourself. Obviously, if you're a spiritual intuitive, if you can tell us a little bit about your history, when you realized that you had certain abilities, and what were those abilities?
Okay. Well, I had a death experience at a young age. I drowned when I was 4. That was the beginning of it because, that was sort of my first encounter with the other side and really having a remembrance of the non-physical dimensions. And throughout my life, I just had really profound spiritual experiences from out of body, lucid dreaming. I was always at a young age, especially up into my teenage years, I was always dreaming prophetic dreams and seeing things before they happened and announcing them into my family. And so my dad recognized that I had a gift there that his grandmother had. So it was kind of early for me that I started to realize that I had, this capacity to understand the non-physical dimensions. And of course, I was in denial about that for a long time, late into my 20s. And then about the time that I was in my 30s, I had a full-blown spiritual awakening, third eye opening and all that stuff. And it was undeniable at that point. And I was given the pearl of wisdom, if you will. And over those years, I went through, ascension stages, and eventually I was very clearly guided to become a spiritual intuitive life coach, or I like to call it an ascension guide. But I do a lot of different things, from being a medium and assisting people through ascension and assisting people on their twin flame journey, all kinds of stuff, energy healing, shadow healing, etc.
Well, that's good that your father recognized it, and it seems like your family was very open to it, because, a lot of times if you get born into some families, they don't want to hear about it, or they try to squash that in you. And
well, I had a little of both. He was accepting of the fact that I was having these dreams, but he did not like, my awareness of having past lives and reincarnation, because that wasn't part of his religious belief system. So I kind of got a little bit of both. In some regards, he was supportive, and in other regards, he was absolutely not. And so it was very confusing for me, which is part of why I kind of stuffed it in the closet for a while.
Understandable. Tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, a little more detail about your near-death experience when you drowned, and, what did you experience at that point?
Well, I've had several of them, but in that particular one, I was 4 years old, and my parents were on a honeymoon. My dad got married to his second wife, and so they left us in the care of a family that already had 4 of their own kids, and there were 8 of us. So this family had 12 kids to watch over, and they took us to a public pool, and I was one of the smallest ones and didn't know how to swim, so I got left on the steps, and eventually I kind of floated out into the water and sunk underneath it and realized that, well, I can't breathe underwater, so I was trying to move my way back over to where the steps were, and the water kept swishing me out the other way, and I was kind of having a battle with the water. This was when I became acutely aware of how powerful water is, the element of water. But I was battling to get my way back over, and this was quite a while that this went on, until I finally started to I was having a conversation with God, if you will, and I was really ticked off that I was having to go back already, because I knew I was 4 years old, and I was like, what do you mean? I just got here. So, but eventually I saw the light, and I felt, that tunnel of just peace and love, and the embracing of all of these angelic beings, and just this perfect calm and perfect, beautiful, blissful feeling. And I just had an understanding of our love and our oneness and that kind of a thing. I also saw yin and yang, the symbol of yin and yang. At the time I wasn't exactly sure what that meant, but it touched me, and it was obvious that I had gone to the other side. And so when I came back, I had a deep impressions of what heaven was like.
Now, do you remember talking to anybody specific or meeting any people in general when you were over there at that first time? And I do have to comment on the fact that I didn't want to interrupt you, that you said the first of many times. I mean, how many near-death experiences have you had?
I know. I'm worse than a cat. I've had a lot of them. In fact, I noticed when you guys were doing the introduction that Irene said that she had quit smoking 3 years ago. I did as well, and I flatlined 4 times in that experience alone. But prior to that, I had to have several other death experiences coming out of body and also through meditation and everything else. But I've had quite a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just, obviously I'm supposed to be here for something, so I'm trying to figure that out now.
So it was after the first NDE, near-death experience, that you realized that you started to understand you had this intuition, these abilities that your dad recognized in you?
Yeah, it was pretty obvious, like, for me early on. I had several quite profound spiritual experiences at age 7, and I also had a really challenging upbringing as well, and so it was like obviously maybe I was meant to have these experiences to help me cope with the earthly life that I was given, but I was left home alone a lot, and so it caused me to do a lot of inner searching and searching for somebody to hold on to and grab onto, and there was nobody there except the spirit world. So it sort of forced me to seek understanding in other places.
Well, I like getting into some details if you don't mind talking about them. When you say you had a couple of other experiences around when you were 7, that sounded pretty important. Can you talk about what those experiences were?
Yeah, we grew up in a neighborhood in Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah, back in the early 80s, and late 70s is when I was a small child. And during that time, that was when there was quite a lot of activity with serial killers all over the planet, all over the country, and especially Ted Bundy had just been in Utah and had heard a couple of girls out there, and we had Jeffrey Dahmer's and all that. And so it was really ripe in the air. And we lived about 4 blocks away from a serial killer who was killing young children, 4 and 6 and 10-year-old kids. And actually there were a couple at the time, but we had one in particular that lived 4 blocks away from us. And he had been in our neighborhood in front of our yard trying to get a couple of my brothers to go to his house at one point before we knew that he was the killer. And I was in a grocery store when I was about 4 years old when a boy named Danny Davis went missing. And I just remember hearing the sound on the intercom, "Danny Davis, your grandmother's looking for you, Danny Davis, and I could hear the panic, and it was getting more. And so I knew as a small child that there was trouble in the air in my environment, if you will. And my parents had been divorced. My mom was deemed mentally ill, and she moved to another state. So my dad ended up really kind of raising us by himself. And you know how that goes when you're a single parent. You just simply can't do both jobs. So the kids got left home alone a lot. And so here we were in this environment where we were left home alone. There's serial killers everywhere killing people. And because there was no parent to oversee us, we kind of had to leave the door unlocked so that each of us could come and go as we needed to from our different school schedules. And so I grew up in an environment of real raw and very real fear. And we had a field that was behind our house that I used to have to walk through to get to school every day. And it was a field that a lot of homeless people would come and hang out because there was an old guy, Mr. Jones, that would go to Mexico half of the year. And so these drug addicts and homeless people or whatnot would come in this field where his homes were, and they would hang out and mooch off of his property and do drugs and things like that. And I would have to walk through that field every day to get to school and every day to get back. And it was terrifying.
Oh.
And so eventually I used to pray a lot and cry and beg for, somebody to be there for me and all of that. But I remember one time in particular trying so hard to get the courage to walk through that field to get back home again. And I was almost paralyzed with fear. I just couldn't seem to get myself to move through it. And I had to get home, but I just couldn't do it, And I had a real one day I just had this real profound Christ-like image come and touch my heart, and like my whole heart just lit up and opened up with light and love, and I was told that I would never have to worry about walking through that field. And I just had this warm feeling all around me, and this understanding that I was always going to be safe and that I didn't need to fear it, and that I was going to be protected. And I felt it all throughout my being, and I never once feared walking through that field again after that. So that was, just one of many, many, many experiences as a small child that kind of got me going on the path. I mean, later I've had quite a lot of other types of experiences, but that was one that I was 7 years old, and I knew that I was being protected somehow.
It's fascinating. You were going to say something, Irene?
No, I wanted to ask about the tunnel, actually, when you saw the tunnel.
Oh, the tunnel in the drowning?
Well, you see, my father, right, he was like you. Well, he used to dream. He used to dream, and everything he dreamt always happened.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the ironing board one day. I was in my, I must have been about 28 years old, ironing something to go to work in. And I went downstairs, and he told me that he'd had a dream. He'd been in a tunnel. He was taken through this dark tunnel, and he knows that it was death, that he was traveling through this tunnel, and all these hands were trying to grab him. People were trying to grab him, but he could see the light at the end of this tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And I never clicked. I just put it down to being a dream. I never clicked, but 1 month later, my father was dead.
Wow.
So obviously he foresaw his own death.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But it always worried me because they said it wasn't a good experience. So even when I did click and realised he's foreseen his own death, what worries me is the fact, did he really go through a rough time after he died in that tunnel, wherever he's gone or whatever? I don't know, and it upset me. It just upset me because Dad's account of going through the tunnel was not a good one.
Yeah, I've had several death experiences, and every one of them I saw different things and different things were revealed to me. And I've had that one too, where the hands were grabbing at me and they weren't pleasant. And it was kind of like they were trying to feed on my energy and hold my soul from being able to move forward. And later on I've learned to understand what's going on there. But every experience that I've had has definitely been different. Most of them are pleasant and positive, but I've had a couple that were definitely not on the light side of things.
Yeah.
When I quit smoking in particular, it was the darkest death experiences that I've ever had.
Well, you're in a dark place when you quit smoking anyway, don't you? Because you're actually gagging for a fag.
Yeah,
Correct.
Maybe so. It was pretty intense. I was shown a couple of other past lives when it happened, like two portals in the sky kind of opened up, and I saw two past lives that I had passed away in similar circumstances. But I was flatlining, and when I hit the bottom, it was all darkness. There was nothing love or light or anything there. It was quite unpleasant, and I had to really fight through that and fight to save my life and fight to breathe again and fight to renew my lung. I'm 3 years into it like you are, and I've been in a sick bed pretty much for 3 years just fighting to heal.
Oh, this is it.
Now, were you in the hospital when this happened?
Not when I flatlined, but I did go to the hospital, every time that happened. I would go to the hospital, and I was asking them to help me breathe and to give me x-rays. I was given, before I quit smoking, I had an angelic being, two of them actually, but one in particular was a female, and they tried to lift my light body out of my body and showed me that I was hooked, and there was a hook on my light body so I couldn't come all the way out of my skin, and that I was going to need to quit smoking, and they showed me this large dark spot on the left side of my body. And I also had dreams and things like that prior to this, so I was being guided up to this point so that when it happened I wasn't as in shock as I might have been otherwise, although I did go into shock over it as well because it was really traumatic. But they showed me this darkness, and so I meditate a lot and I really communicate with the non-physical every day, and so I was trusting everything that they were showing me and leading me through. And at this point I was going to the hospital asking them to give me x-rays, and they were treated me like I was a crazy person. They said they didn't see anything and all that. And 3 months later, I ended up purging out a mass out of my lung that was about larger than a baseball that I was suffocating under.
Holy crap.
Yeah, I have pictures of it. But they didn't see it in their x-rays.
That's funny that they didn't see that.
It's ridiculous, really.
Yeah, well,
it's ridiculous.
Don't get me started on so-called modern medicine.
Right.
You know, I mean, we've come a long way in a lot of different ways, but we've also taken so many steps backwards. It's not even funny.
Yeah, I agree. They're so in the business of keeping you sick that it's kind of ridiculous, some of the things that I've heard in these hospitals. But they didn't even explain to me, you know, what I was going through. I was pretty scared. I was traumatized. I didn't know if I was going to die and be in a cancer clinic or what. I was very in shock. I had flatlined 4 times. I was given some pretty intense visions, and like I said, I hit this bottom point where it was real dark. I saw myself being buried in an old, you know, cheap wooden casket back in the cowboy days. So I must have been a male in some cowboy days in some past life or something. It was really intense stuff. And so by the time I got to the hospital and I was going through severe withdrawals, my body was twitching like a snake that got killed, and it was just twitching like that for several weeks, which I know now is, you know, the withdrawals that I was going through from just cold turkey coming off of it and having it come out of my system. But I was also getting, like I said, a lot of guidance from light beings, and I had what I know now is called remote surgery. And it's where the light beings were assisting to perform surgery on my lung to help remove all of that tar out of my body that was suffocating me. And like I said, I was given first a dream that I was suffocating, and then that day my mom suffocated and died. And I thought it was me in my dream, but it was her. But then I also realized that we're doing a lot of ancestral karmic kind of healing together. So I was given that dream the day that she did, and she ended up on life support for a few more days, and then we pulled the plug on her. But she did suffocate, asphyxiated, and I had dreamt it. And then 6 months later, I was asked to quit smoking, and I was suffocating under this tar. So it was pretty intense stuff. But I was getting guided by these light beings, and what I understood is that they were kind of assisting to perform surgery from the non-physical dimensions. And I trust the spirit world with everything I am. I trust it way more than the humans and way more than the human world. And so I follow it all the time. But of course, this was the first time I had something like this happen, so I didn't know it had a term like remote surgery. I just understood kind of what was happening, and I just so happened to get on YouTube, and there was a video that came up from Wayne Dyer, and he literally talked about having remote surgery done on his eye by light beings. So it was a confirmation for me that what I just experienced was real. And it was awesome.
Wow.
Now,
very interesting.
Well,
I wish they'd do a bit of remote surgery on me.
We can do some surgery on you.
Yeah. My back. Do my back. And also, you know, I've never bought the tar up. This is it.
You never have.
It has come off of my chest. Maybe that's why I rattle when I talk.
Do you still have like the phlegm and stuff in your lungs? What's that?
Nothing's ever come up. I've never bought anything up. After I stopped smoking, I never got any coughing or anything like that.
Well, some of it can go in your stomach as it's, you know, as your body's your body's going to purge it out eventually, and it's going to come out somehow or another, whether it's through your stomach and your intestines or through, you know, whatever. For me, it was just such a mass there that had built up that it was life-threatening, very much so. And the doctors didn't understand. They really did not help me at all, and they were really pretty rude to me also. And so but I've had so many experiences like that even with my healing, I always go to the spirit first because I just trust it so much more. But for me, it was definitely life-threatening, and I had been meditating quite a lot for a lot of years, so I've made it so much of a daily practice that I don't know. Maybe that was part of why. I'm not sure why people have different experiences, but I just know for me that I really meditate with the light beings every day anyway. So in this case, it was just, and I get high voltage lessons in life too, like high voltage hardcore situations and high voltage angelic situations as well. So I don't know. I mean, everybody's different, I guess.
Well, what do you mean by situations?
Sorry, Mark. Didn't mean to interrupt.
What do I mean by hardcore situations?
Yes.
Just meaning that I've gone through so many things in my life. Most people would not believe me if I told them all the different experiences that I've been through, including having frostbite up to my knees, being, raped and molested multiple times, being homeless, going to Russia and hanging out in banyas with the mayor of Moscow, meeting the head of the KGB and seeing torture chambers. You name it. I've had some very extraordinary, extreme situations in my life, and I've also had extraordinary kind of extreme angelic situations as well.
Mm. So you've had your ups and downs then?
Yeah, very much so.
Interesting, very interesting. I've forgotten what I was going to say now. I had something on my tongue, and then Mark said something, and now I've lost it. Carry on.
About the smoking, yes?
Yeah. Yeah, it was about the smoking. I know that most people that give up smoking, they bring up all this gunk and everything. Mm-hmm. But I could never understand why it never happened to me. I smoked since I was 13. Over 50-odd years I smoked. I ended up in hospital 3 times on nebulizers and one thing or another, and I've been stuff pumped into my veins and all that sort of thing. I'm on pumps now, asthma pumps and things but I never brought anything up, and I just can't understand it. I really cannot understand why it has not come up. I've been waiting to give this, for it to come up for all these years, for 3 years, and nothing.
I was drinking a lot of apple cider vinegar. I was kind of guided to drink apple cider vinegar, and I was doing some real purposeful breathing techniques, pulling the light in through my lung and stuff like that. And that may have helped cause it to purge up. But like I said, I felt them performing a surgery on me for almost 3 months. And also, I don't know anybody. I joined this group on Facebook that's got many thousands of people that have quit smoking. And I posted the picture up there. Nobody's ever said that much came out at once. Usually they'll have like a little dime size or a quarter size or whatever here or there. But it was kind of unusual to have that large of a mass come out in one clean, shot. It's kind of gross that we're talking about it, but it is what it is, right? It
is. You never know. People hearing us might be so revolted by it that they may give smoking.
Right.
Do them good. But, I've had 1 or 2 little bits come up, but it's been clear. It's not been black, anything like that, or green or anything like that. And that's only when I've been choking on an orange or something. But I have got some apple cider vinegar, so I'm going to start taking that and see if that can bring up any muck on my chest. And then I'll be able to sing to everyone on over the microphone.
There you go. Don't drink too much of the apple cider vinegar, though, because if you drink too much, it can kind of tear up your stomach lining. So just do a little bit. And you can do like baking soda with lemon in it also, and that will help to break things up in your system. So,
yeah. Detox, really, isn't it?
It is a detox. And really, that's what you're doing when you quit. And you're detoxing quite a while because you've been doing that damage to your body for a very long time. So the detox process can take years.
Yeah. I haven't got years.
You're already 3 years into it. It's not going to hurt you to love yourself a little.
Well, as long as the angelic beings never come down and tell me I have to give up my red wine.
Oh gosh, yep. I got asked to give that up too.
Really? Oh my God.
Something, and I can't drink because I'm allergic to alcohol.
Right.
Yeah, it makes me sneeze, my eyes run, everything. There's very few people that I know that have an allergy to alcohol. I think it's all the junk that they put into
It is. And they do it to your coffee too. They spray all the products with these deadly chemicals, and then you want to drink the wine, but the wine's poisoned. The coffee's poisoned. The coffee. I lost my stomach lining this last year several times. It kept coming up, and I'm pretty much down to the fact that the coffee was soaked in those chemicals, and it was eating my stomach up.
Oh. Got a bit of interference going on here. I don't know what's causing it. But, for me to have a glass of wine, I've got to take an antihistamine at least, 30 minutes before I have a glass of wine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you're allergic to it then. That's strange.
Yeah, I'm allergic to alcohol. I drink milk. I'm a milkaholic.
That's funny.
I can only drink lactose milk. I can't. I'm lactose intolerant now, and that started about 3-4 years ago.
And that's probably from the chemicals in there too. You think?
Yeah, it could be. Could be. Anyway, that's the medical side over and done with, people.
Right? Thanks.
But now I want to back up a little bit to something you just said earlier, and I thought, Irene, you would have been all over this like white on rice, but how did you get into a situation of going over in Russia and meeting the head of KGB and hanging out with the mayor of Moscow? I mean, what was that situation?
Well, I grew up in Utah, and I had gone to college for public relations and marketing at the University of Utah, and I just got out of school, and there was a guy that was very wealthy that lived in Park City, Utah, and he was very reputable. He owns half of Parley's Canyon, and he helped to develop 2 of the world's most expensive hotels that are in Utah, in Park City, and he happened to own a business in Russia where he was basically the money man. He was lending Russia. He was lending the dignitaries of Russia monies to renovate Hotel Moscow. So he was their bank, and he was my boss. And I did marketing for him at the time. Pardon?
Sounds like an ex-boyfriend of mine.
That's funny. Well, he was much older than I am, but he was my boss, and I did a lot of marketing and PR and stuff for different businesses that he had in Utah and in Park City. But in this case, it was in 2001, and Russia had just opened up real estate for private citizens to purchase that year, and they were also renovating, and he was the money man for them. So I got to go out there for a couple of weeks with him, and right when we got off the plane, we had a couple of cars worth of bodyguards surrounding us the whole time, and it was very, very interesting journey. I ended up making friends with the head of the KGB. Had a daughter named Maria at the time, and she was my age, and we worked together on some of the stuff that we were doing there, and we became really good friends, and it was very interesting. Her story was very interesting also.
What did you make of Russia?
It was awesome in some ways, and it was really strange in other ways. I ended up on a date with an Armenian gangster, and those guys now are kind of like the mob, the Italian mob was in Las Vegas in the 50s. They're literally running around with bodyguards and shooting each other and, committing some pretty crazy crimes and things like that. And so there's Armenians, Chechens, and Russian people. So there's 3 different types of Russians that are all coexisting in Russia. And so it was kind of interesting to just learn the different types of people and what's going on in their culture and stuff like that. But it was cold, and it was snowy, and there was a lot of I got my life saved pretty much 3 times while I was out there, so it was interesting. But I had a cab driver tried to get me into his cab, and I didn't need a cab, and he was very, very insistent that I got in his cab, and that was kind of weird. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on, the sex slave trade and things like that. The most wealthy women out there are the hookers, because the people are only allowed to make so much money a month no matter what they do. They can go to school for free and become a doctor, but they're still only getting $400 a month. Yeah. And so the people that are doing like prostitution, they're making loads of money, because people from all over the world and the USA and stuff are coming out there and paying these prostitutes, and they're very wealthy women. So it's kind of an interesting culture, to say the least. But.
No, in my day, I was wondering whether you noticed how clean it was, because in my day, the streets and everything were absolutely spotless out there. There was no paper anywhere kicking around in the gutters and the streets or anything.
What part of Russia were you in?
I was all over Russia.
You were all over?
Yeah. I think that's enough about Russia then.
That's funny. I was right in the heart of Moscow, and it definitely wasn't dirty, but
it was Moscow that I first noticed it. When I first compared with London, it was absolutely spotless.
I didn't really have that impression. I grew up in Utah, though, and Utah's very, very spotless. So anywhere outside of there is always a little bit of a hit or miss. But I did notice that people, were putting their cigarette butts on the ground and stuff.
But you were out there in 2001, weren't you?
Yeah.
I was out there a lot earlier, you see.
Mm-hmm.
When there was, in the days when if you did throw a cigarette butt down on the ground, you would be in a lot of trouble if you got caught.
Oh.
But, yeah. Anyway, so getting back to what we were talking about.
Well, you've had a lot of, from what little you've said of your life, Ellen, you've had so many different experiences, good and bad, and just plain wild. When you deal, let me figure out how I want to ask this. When you deal, whether through meditation or how these light beings communicate with you, I mean, would you consider these to be, and I hate the words, the traditional words, but would you consider these to be angelic beings or like human type spirits who are not currently incarnated? I mean, who are these entities that you feel that you're interacting with?
Well, I guess it depends on the interaction and at what time and place I'm going through something, because I've dealt with a lot of beings from other dimensions that are a multitude of things, from fourth dimensional beings on up to angelic beings. I like to call some of them star beings, so a lot of people maybe call them Pleiadians or whatnot, but I've had communication with star beings, and mostly I'm in communication with the angelic, so that would be like non-physical human angelic beings, if you will. But I've also had encounters where I saw what people would call draconians, which I had when I quit smoking, and I was shown that this being had been kind of where I was hooked. I was shown that this being was holding on to me. I was hooked by this being that was feeding off of my energy, and he was not an angelic being by any means, and it was what I know now is called a draconian.
You believe, or you think that draconians are not good beings at all, then?
I understand that they kind of have reign over a particular dimension that was part of they were given a certain dimension to exist in, I guess, if you will. And I don't think that all of them are benevolent, no.
Because we've had guests on here that have said that, haven't we, Mark? Some have come on here and said, oh, they're evil, they're bad, they're this, they're that.
Yeah.
Come on and said complete opposite, Well,
you know what?
Yeah.
I feel like it depends on who you're talking to and their point of view. If there's one thing I've learned with people who talking in the ufology community, there's a lot of black and white thinking out there. And people will think like, oh, well, the Greys are bad, but the Nordics are good, and the Draconians or the Reptilians are bad and evil, and yet, if you look at everything in nature, in the world, there really is no good and bad. There just is, and things may happen to people that they may interpret as being bad, like the people. Let's say the people, some of the abductees that we've interviewed and spoken with. I mean, like I said, we talked with Whitley Strieber last week, the author of Communion, and in his early days when he first started having his encounters, he was scared to death. It seemed like invasive, like he was being hurt. It seemed evil in a lot of different ways. And except later on, as he learned and started to grow and started to develop a relationship with these visitors, as he called them, it's not so black and white. I mean, some of these beings are just the way they are, and it's how we interpret their actions as good or evil, which I think it's more gray area, just like humans. There's good humans, bad humans, indifferent humans. I think it's the same with most of these races.
The majority of humans are not born bad, just like animals. They're not born bad. It's life that makes them go bad,
Yeah, I was going to bring up 2 points on that. One is where you said that there's no good or bad, there just is. It's kind of like, yes, but the deeds that Jeffrey Dahmer did weren't necessarily benevolent deeds. So it's not, it's just one of those things and why he did them is a whole nother story. And of course, his core being is light. He was made of the light like all of us, right? So what I understand with the draconian experience that I had, and I don't have, in my understanding, I just believe that we're all one, including the draconians, including the greys or any other, races or whatever else is in the cosmos. It's all made from the same source creator. And so at the end of the day, it's all about love. But I think that for me, what I was faced with this draconian was really, in some regards, an aspect of myself too. So although it was an entity, an energy that I had drawn to myself, it was also an aspect of my own darkness that either drew him to me or that I needed to overcome within myself, if that makes sense.
True. And let me clarify my statement. I was talking about things in nature and in general. And yes, there are definitely some bad, evil people out there. Let's face it, there are. People who do very, very bad things. And sometimes, their motivations for doing it is either mental illness or how, as you mentioned, how they were grown up. Something is wrong with them. Something is twisted inside of them to cause them to behave this way. So yeah, I mean, but I'm just talking about in general. I use nature as a big example because I've studied a shamanic path for a while, and again, everything in nature. The gazelle might think the lion is evil for killing and eating it, but it's doing what it was born to do. It's it just is, and again, it's a lot of it is open to interpretation and our own biases sometimes on how we feel about things.
Yeah, I can agree to that as well. In my understanding about the draconians and the greys, and that is that they have kind of had a big role in humanity's, in the way that we live as humans on this planet at this time, and that we were originally, incarnate to live more in a utopian type environment, but that some interference somewhere along the way happened, and they had a role in that to where they kind of started to loose farm and feed off of the human's energy. And if you ever watch have you ever watched the series The Dark Crystal that's on Netflix right now? They really kind of speak about this in that show also, where you can see the little crocodile looking beings that are feeding on the little fairy ones and stuff like that. So they're kind of, in a sense, that's how I understand that the draconians is that they created a system, really, and that system feeds on humans' energy. So they may not have the physical embodiment that a human has, but if they want to rape little children, they can attach themselves onto you and get you through telepathy and through thought and everything else to think the thought and then do the deed, and then they can feed on that energy, if that makes sense. So the soul itself, or the human soul itself, has to be true to its own self and fight against that thought process or that activity or whatever. For me, it would have been, keep smoking, kid, or whatever it is. That's my interpretation.
Okay. Make sure I wasn't on mute there. The let's talk about some of the. You mentioned that you've had several experiences with several past lives. Can you talk about some of those?
Yeah, I can talk about some of those. Where do you want to start?
Come on, Ellen. Give us a
what do you want to know? I'm kind of in a stage now where maybe I've tapped into them a few times and I've started to become very acutely aware of them. The first time, obviously, that I was aware that I had lived on this planet before was when I was 4 and I drowned. And when I went through that tunnel and everything, I just had this knowingness or remembrance on a soul level that I had been here many times before. And I was kind of pissed off that I was having to go back at this time again because I just got here again. So I was like, wait a minute. But it was just a knowingness. There wasn't a whole lot of memory at that point of specific lifetimes, specific experience. Later on, I started to get a little more into my soul work and kind of clear out my karma and clear out my energy and everything else, get more aligned. And then I started to have more remembrance of past lives. And another time that I became very aware of it is when I had this full-blown awakening. And it was like my third eye opened and my crown chakra opened and wisdom was just poured through. It was like a waterfall of information was just poured into the top of my head and just filled me with all this knowingness, if you will. And I accessed the Akashic records and that type of a thing. And that's where I had more awareness that I had been living in past lives, and I had little glimpses of them. And I also met my twin flame, or my divine partner, and saw that together we had lived in past lives, and that my daughter and I had even incarnated together many times from the beginning of time. I kind of tapped into the days of Lemuria and that type of a thing, and just saw that we had incarnated and gone through many different lifetimes of evolution together. Me, my daughter, and me, and my twin flame, and me, and even one of my brothers and my dad, and that kind of a thing, that we've been traveling for many lifetimes together. And then, after that, I've had other experiences, like I said, when I quit smoking, and it's like these two portals of just opened up in the sky, and it was like a picture inside the portal that I could just look into and see that this lifetime I lived in the Renaissance days, and I was it was kind of dark ages and that type of a thing, and that I died from some kind of illness that might have been related to smoking, or it was similar to a lung injury, and that I had died from that. And then I saw the other one, and I saw very clearly that I was a cowboy, and that I had lived during the those days, and that I had was a very thin man, and I got buried in this old cheap casket. It was kind of a horrible feeling. And then since then, I've kind of gone through some other, tapping into it, where I have a very articulate, educated Chinese man that I was once in a lifetime, kind of a chubby little Chinese guy. And he's been talking to me quite a lot, if you will, but I've been really tapping into that aspect of myself, because I'm in a different place in my journey where I'm being asked to do something. So I'm tapping into that lifetime because it holds a lot of energy and work that I've done in previous lifetimes that needs to be brought forth now. So that's just a little touch on the topic.
Oh, really? You're like me. You haven't had anything really like being Cleopatra or anything like that. I've oh my love, God, my
yeah. I've never had any memories of any great characters like that I once was. I think in a glimpse I saw some stuff back, but I don't remember.
Well, the only one really, all the regressions. Every time I've been regressed back in life, they've been bum lives, absolute bum lives.
Yeah.
Poor, no money, married to drunks, had loads of children, this, that, and the other, begging on the streets or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Till I'd me and Mark, we're sisters, aren't we, Mark?
You, in a manner.
That's the only famous one I've got.
Well, you were a Pulitzer Prize winning author.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, just we've told this story before, so I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. I did a hypnotic regression once. Somebody had sent me a tape. They wanted me to help them with the book, and so I did this hypnotic regression, and a few times nothing ever happened, but one time it happened, and I saw myself as a young woman in the mid 1800s. And I knew I was in Boston. I was in this house, really ornate old house. I could even look at myself in the mirror and see what I looked like. Mm-hmm. And the name Marian Howe, Marian, not Marianne, Marian Howe came to mind. And so I started doing some research on the Howes of Boston, and I found myself.
Interesting.
I found that my mother was Julia Ward Howe, who wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic, famous
Very
abolitionist song. And
our mother.
Well,
we're just arguing.
Because we found out later that Irene was my older sister, who had written a biography of Julia Ward Howe that won the Pulitzer. And that we actually found pictures of ourselves and found where we died and whatnot. There's a lot of information about it.
It's not the same even now, don't we? We haven't changed much.
No, we still argue.
You bear a resemblance to her, and I bear a resemblance to your sister.
The pictures that we found, there was a family picture of the father and the three daughters and one son. And the picture that was of Marian, actually her name is Florence Marian Howe, has a vague resemblance to me, especially when I was young at that age. And
that's awesome.
And the picture of who Irene was supposed to be, I forget her name off the top of my head, looks like her when she was younger. So
that's so cool.
Very, very interesting experience.
Then I started looking into the character that I was meant to have been, right? And she had a love for Naples and the Amalfitano area, and actually she wrote a poem or something, a piece on Amalfi. Well, I go there every year, so I've been going there every year to Amalfi in Italy since 1970.
In your physical life, you've been going there?
Yeah, my life is Amalfi.
Interesting.
Yeah, she's always loved traveling there.
That's so awesome. I've astral traveled to France and realized that I was visiting people in France somewhere that I must have had in past lives. I just happened to have a conscious awareness that I was astral traveling there to visit people that I knew and loved, and I found that to be kind of interesting. I must have had a past life there as well.
Yeah.
Well, it's when we talk about past lives, as Irene mentioned, in most past lives, you're just an average person. You're never really anybody famous, and even
most people they're either Cleopatra or they're Father Christmas or somebody,
or Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but again, it was interesting that the people we found were slightly famous and known. There was one time, oh God, many years ago when I first started to learn to meditate. I got out of it. I really need to get back into it. But I did a kind of a journey once, almost like a shamanic journey, and I traveled to the Akashic Records, which looked to me like this big grand library with white marble columns and miles and miles of like books and scrolls and whatnot. And I was led up to this one little section that was me.
Yes.
And I was allowed to pull two of them out to see what these past lives were. And one of them was a Roman emperor. Now,
Oh, sweet.
there was no name. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it was any. There were a lot of Roman emperors. So, but I don't think it was any of the more famous ones. But it was a Roman emperor in one life.
Back then.
What's that?
Didn't get stabbed in the back then.
Not that I'm aware of. I couldn't remember.
Did you see why Rome burned?
Well, no, I was not Nero. But again, what I was being shown was for a reason. I just got the vague, details. One lifetime was a Roman emperor, and then I pulled another one. I was a lady in waiting in the Middle Ages. So in a way, the lesson that I was being taught for that point in my life, I felt was balance, the extremes. In one, I was a man of power. Another one, I was a woman in servitude. And at that point in my life, I was going through a lot of balancing out different energies and aspects of my life. And that's what, when I was shown that, that's what it was teaching me.
That makes total sense. When I accessed the Akashic Records, I didn't see past lives. I guess I did in the sense that I remembered, Lemuria and things like that. But that's awesome. You were able to pick the books out. And, of course, they always show us exactly what we need at that moment, right?
Yeah, and they only show you just what you need, and they don't show a damn thing more, let me tell you. And for me, it's not always visual. It's sometimes it's images in my mind, but sometimes it's just a knowing. I'll pick up on information and knowing more than actually seeing anything. And again, I don't call myself a psychic or anything like that. I've just in over the years things that I've experienced.
Yeah.
Right. What I want to ask you, Helen, is do you have the ability to remove dirt and clutter from someone's previous past life?
I have the ability to remove dirt and clutter from their energy field, which would include part of their past lives as well, yes.
There you go, Mark. Get cleaned up, Mark.
What's that?
She's telling me to get cleaned up.
Oh, that's funny. You got dirty hands, huh?
I don't know.
That's funny.
Who knows? You mentioned earlier about twin flames, and for a lot of people, what is the difference from your interpretation between a soulmate and a twin flame?
Yeah, I know. This topic is one where there is so much misinformation and confusion about it because it's such a confusing journey to travel through. I can only speak for myself and what I've experienced, but I went to Source about 10 years ago. I had my heart just ripped right open and torn in half, and I went to Source, and I was shown that we are made in our soul, male and female. And people, take that for what it's worth. I'm not going to say it's, same sex or not same sex or whatever, but your soul is made with male, female aspects of itself, right? And that that we were made this way. Our soul is created this way. So we're already in this wholeness with a divine counterpart or our alchemical partner. And that part of our journey in incarnating was to come apart and to go into darkness and go into these, war type situations and everything else, and see if we could find our way back to love and to our soul and our home again. And anyway, the difference between a soulmate versus a twin flame is that the twin flame is you and is always with you at all times, whereas a soulmate really doesn't share your exact same soul signature. You're a unique soul. You're the only soul like you in all of the cosmos. Nobody can duplicate you. You're unique. You're the only one. And yeah, we're all connected as one on a certain level, but you're the only one that's the exact puzzle piece that you are to the big puzzle of all that is, right? And your twin flame is the exact same energy as your puzzle piece that you are, and they're the only one that is the exact same as you.
So, if I understand you correctly, a twin flame is their soul of that person and your soul are actually connected to that. What would I call it? The source soul. That source energy. So basically, it's that source energy or soul is inhabiting two bodies at once.
Yes. So your high soul is the same as their high soul, and you have your body and they have their body, but you both have the same high soul, if you will.
How can people recognize their twin flame? Most people go through life not even knowing about it. So many people focus on like soulmate. Oh, who's my soulmate? Who's my soulmate? My wife watches, I tease her, this trash TV, 90 Day Fiance. Oh God, shows a train wreck, and there's a talk about people finding, their soulmate. I found my soulmate, or I don't know if it's my soulmate. And they get so overly focused on that. And, but is it possible for people to, let's say, have more than one soulmate in a lifetime?
You can have infinite soulmates, because soulmates are just they're just other people, so you can have as many as you want. But you can only have one twin flame, and because they're the exact same unique one and only soul signature in the universe that is them and that is you. So you're only going to have one, but you do go through many different relationships along the way until you're brought to that one. But how would somebody really know is to really, really, really get to know your own soul, which takes tremendous soul work. It's not something you're just going to say, oh, I want to, whatever. You really have to become familiar with your own self and delve into your own shadows and into your own, demons and everything else until you really start to understand who am I and what am I about, and embrace who you are and stop pushing parts of yourself away from yourself, Now,
is a person's twin flame, based on what you were talking about, the masculine and feminine side, is that twin flame in a physical lifetime with you the opposite sex, or can they be a twin flame be the same sex?
I haven't been shown that it can be the same sex, but I haven't been shown that it can't be. So it could be possible. I don't know. I know for me that it's a masculine and a feminine bodies, but I really don't have the answer because it never came into my mind, or I was never shown that it could or couldn't be. I've heard people say that it can be, and I've heard other people say that it cannot be because the divine doesn't make mistakes and you have a gender for a reason. So, that's debatable, but for me, it's the opposite sex.
Well, it goes back with also the the past life or reincarnation, this cycle of return. It makes perfect sense that we would come back as both male and female over multiple lives, because it goes back to what I was mentioning before in that vision. It's all about balance.
Yes.
Balancing out both masculine lifetimes, feminine lifetimes, and all of those experiences, good experiences, bad experiences. It's all like the karma soul train, so to speak.
Yep, I can totally agree with that. At the end of the day, it's really about your soul. And your soul, it doesn't have a gender in the higher dimensions, so it's not necessarily you're here to have soul expansion and soul experience, whatever form you're in.
Right. Of course, nowadays, they're trying to claim that there's how many genders are we up to now? 56?
I don't know. I'm calling BS on that one.
Someone wrote a book over here that there was over 100.
Yeah, and that's just part of the whole ridiculousness of our modern Western society. It's like, come on, people. Yeah. I mean, I can understand, because I know gay people, I know transgendered people, and I can understand that where there's something within their soul that's inhabiting their body that needs that experience. They're identifying with the one soul. But these people who come and say, well, I'm gender neutral. It's like, no, you're not. I mean, you can be a little androgynous, fine. But when it comes down to it, do you have an innie or an outie?
Exactly. I totally agree with that. And I agree. I have friends that are transgender, and I've, of all different types of people in my world. So it's not a judgment thing or anything like that. But I will say that I had an experience, another out-of-body experience, where I was kind of traveling through the womb, and I remembered being in my mother's womb, and I was squeezing onto things, and I remember seeing and understanding something to do with the fact that there's a lot of womb healing that's needed as a collective, individually and collectively. And in the womb, because the womb has been raped and there's been abortions and all types of things, there's a lot of old muscle memory issues in the collective womb itself for all women. And so as the soul's incarnating, if there were problems where maybe the woman was raped or whatever, then the soul incarnating can choose that it's going to be, gay or transgender or male or female or whatever it is. And it's choosing that based on some of the karmic healing that's being needed to be done. So I think that in the higher picture of things, there's a lot more going on than just, I'm gay or I'm not gay or whatever it is. There's a lot of deep quantum level healing that needs to be done, and that's part of why people are incarnating with different experiences, right? So that they can work on the healing there.
The only one I really can't figure out are furries. That one just goes right over my head.
What is it? Wait, what is it?
Furries. You ever heard of that? I actually went to a hotel once where they were having a furry convention, and that's where people dress up in animal costumes, like mascots, for sports teams, these big animal costumes, and they're identifying it, and it's kind of a sexual thing. It's like, oh God. No, that's
yeah, that sounds like bestiality a little bit. It's a bit distorted, it seems like to me.
Yeah, a little too disturbing for me.
That sounds like some Matrix type interference.
Sounds like some sort of interference. I don't know about Matrix.
What did you call it?
Pervert.
Pervert. Yeah. Well, same difference. Yes. I agree. It is. It's perverse.
I expect we've got them over here, but they're not known as furries.
That's funny. That just sounds like a nice, cute way to say I'm a pervert.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to paranormal conventions, but going to that hotel where they had the furry convention, and I'm seeing all the people dressed up there, and I'm going, okay, this is a new experience.
I thought it was some sort of pantomime or something like that,
I thought they did weird stuff in Vegas, but I've never heard of furry convention before.
Yeah, though this was in Minnesota of all places.
Wow.
I had to go out for work, and it's like, okay. Anyway, on to the next.
Interesting. Well, thank you for expanding my mind on that.
Yeah, you might have to do a little Google searching on that one.
I might.
In looking at your Facebook page, and it's listing all the different things that you do, there's a couple on here that I have absolutely no idea what they mean. I was wondering if you can enlighten us. What is a quantum grabber?
Does it say grabber or healer?
It says grabber. Graber.
Well, it shouldn't say grabber, so I'm going to have to take a... Where did you find that?
On your page.
On my main profile?
Not your main profile. The actual...
The spiritual healer page? Okay,
yes.
I'm going to have to look at that. It's probably a typo.
Okay.
And I'm glad that you brought that up because I wouldn't possibly be able to answer that accurately. Quantum healer, you know what that is, right?
Well, actually, not really. What is quantum healing?
Well, quantum healing's where if you, let's say you were going to a therapist's office for 10 years and you really had some deep-rooted, psychological problems or emotional issues that you've been trying to work on for 10 years in a therapist's office and you just haven't got there yet, I'm able through energy work and through quantum healing to go in and really kind of unplug the wound and help speed you through the healing quite quickly, as opposed to sitting in a therapist's office for a long time. Not to disregard therapy or anything like that, but you know that when we start to get into the healing arts with spiritual intuition and that, we can kind of go right into the source of where the wound came from and unplug it. And of course, it is spiritual in addition to psychological and emotional. So quantum healing can quickly speed you. It can jump your timelines from one to the next and heal you in Godspeed, if you will.
That sounds very similar to in shamanism, shamanic practitioners. There's a ritual called soul retrieval.
Yes.
And it sounds very similar to there's extraction and then there's soul retrieval, where it's like going through and finding those missing pieces of people, that pieces of their soul break off during traumatic moments of their life, and it's bringing it back and helping to make that person whole.
Yes, I do both of those as well, soul retrieval. And I guess quantum healing would just be, in addition to soul retrieval itself, you're also releasing energies that maybe you attach to yourself unknowingly that are causing you to have a thorn in your paw, if you will. Mm-hmm. So when you unplug that from somebody, oftentimes it can agitate them a little bit. They get emotionally stirred up, and sometimes it can even make you nauseated. You've been through shamanic practices, right? So you understand that even in the healing, sometimes at first you take that medicine, it makes you feel a little icky for a minute, and then you feel wonderful.
Yes, and you mentioned something with picking up on some energies, and since you're familiar with some of the shamanic practices, have you ever heard of depossession?
Depossession meaning exorcism?
No. Yeah, that's where people.
No.
There's a practice of depossession, and in the training that I was taking, not a lot of people would take this part of it because it kind of scared them, but I found it to be fascinating, where sometimes people can pick up a spiritual attachment.
Yes.
and not realize that they have somebody kind of attached to them and hanging on to them. My teachers likened it like some people who have alcohol problems. You know, when you go out and enjoy a drink, they say that the first 2 drinks, those are yours. But anything you drink after that, you're drinking for somebody else. Let's say somebody who is an alcoholic, enjoyed it in life, might be attached to you, and they're using you to try to keep having that experience. But there's many different ways that a soul can attach to you. And I watched this woman who was teaching us. This woman had somebody in the class and brought them up, and we found that there was this little girl spirit attached to her for whatever reason, and helping to. So the depossession part of it is not an exorcism, but it's talking directly to that spirit, getting them to recognize that they are no longer alive, to look and find their own inner light, and then also having the other, helping spirits and guides come down and help lead them through the tunnel into the light, into the other side. So it frees that soul that's attached to the earthly plane and attached to somebody. And of course, the person that's still living the life, it's that influence, whatever is gone out of their life. So it's a very positive experience, and the one that I witnessed was very powerful. You could just feel the energy in the room, and you feel when the soul left the room and crossed over.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've never heard of that term. I've had personally, like, I guess you would call it that, but I called it an exorcism, so maybe it was different. But just where I saw that I had been under sex slave attachments, and when they got released from me, I saw these a whole bunch of little dark entities fly away, kind of like the bats in Batman. So I don't know if that's the same thing or not, but
sounds like your astral critters there, Irene.
Yeah, astral critters.
Astral critters.
I've got to mention here that any rude noises going on in the background, again in this recording, is actually Gertie. She's in the room snoring.
Gertie, the paranormal pup, the official mascot of the Paranormal UK radio show.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
It's an English bulldog, and they snore a lot.
Yeah. Occasionally she sounds a bit demonic, but, she's on the sofa over the other side of the room, and she's away with the fairies at the moment in dreamland, snoring her head off.
Good for her.
I've tried pushing at her, but it doesn't do any good,
Now, what is a DNA activation?
Good one. Well, a DNA activation is, as you probably may have heard, or maybe you already know this, that, we have a lot of dormant DNA in our being. So we've been living on a 2-strand kind of DNA system as humans, but we were originally created with 12 strands. And so activations can be light codes that are downloaded in a person to help stimulate that inactive or dormant DNA so that they can activate the light codes within their own being and step into their divinity.
So with that, those parts of the DNA that are inactive, that would be very similar to what science calls junk DNA, because they don't understand it?
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah. As if the divine makes mistakes, right?
Right.
Let me just put some junk over here.
Yeah, it's like, well, we have an appendix and we don't know what it's for. Of course, I think a lot of that is because, we're hybrids. But that's my opinion.
Right. Could very well be.
Things left over from, okay, let's pair this up with this up and let's see what comes out. Oh, we got a human here.
Yeah. Could very well be. There's some truth in that.
And going from 12 strands down to 2 strands, I mean, really, what happened to the other 10 strands?
Well, there's a lot of controversy about that as well in the communities, and I can only speak from my perspective and my personal experiences, but for me, when I had an awakening, I kind of just had this full-blown alive, like I became so alive. It was like the movie Limitless, where just all of a sudden I had this all-knowingness and abilities to just do anything at any time, anything I wanted, limitless, possibilities. And so it's kind of like your God genes. It's like your God codes within you, that you are a seed of the divine source creator and that you have the capacity to do anything with no limitations. And somehow or another along the way, this DNA got altered, maybe from aliens. Who knows? I don't have the exact answer. I can just go off of what I kind of experienced and understood and perceived. But a lot of people believe that our DNA was altered from maybe alien type beings or something like that, and that we along the way that had that snipped so that we weren't in access to all of our divinity codes, really. So as you start to activate it, all of a sudden you have this remembrance that you are a seed of the divine. You can do anything that you put your mind to, and you have, there is no limitations. You can reverse aging. You can, you know what I'm saying? There's just it's kind of, it's hard for the third dimensional human to wrap their brain around, but there's so much more going on here that we just haven't remembered.
The other one that I'm unclear on here is an alchemical marriage. What is that?
Mm-hmm. The alchemical marriage is the merge of your soul, the feminine and masculine aspects of your soul, coming back into wholeness with yourself. And And so a lot of us who have had awakenings and then got brought to our alchemical partner have had to go through, ascension path and things like that, where we merge that energy, and it's a process that you go through. And there's certain sacraments, if you will, that you end up experiencing that you need to embody in order to have that full alchemical marriage and be back in your wholeness with your male-female counterpart.
Interesting. Okay. And so where you are in your current journey, you said that because of what happened with the smoking, you're bedridden, or you've just been, where are you right now?
I am kind of coming out of that stage now where I went into a sickness, an illness, which I think is pretty common for people on the ascension path, that we go through an illness at some point. It's part of our journey. And I'm kind of on the other side of it now. I'm feeling pretty healthy, and I'm stepping into what I understand is Dharma. And that's where I'm really embodying my life's purpose and gearing up here to write books and teaching and doing YouTube channels and all that other stuff. So I'm shedding my egoic lifestyle of being a realtor, and I'm going in the other direction now and embodying that purpose that I came here for.
So moving more towards working in this path full time?
Yes.
Now, I'm having a brain freeze here.
And you've asked all the questions I wanted to ask. Can't see anymore. Past life regression. We've done that, haven't we? Prophetic dreams. What sort of prophetic dreams do you have?
I have them all the time. If anything, that's really one of my greatest gifts, and thank goodness for it. I've dreamt my grandmother died before she died, and she came to me in the dream, and she was asking for help to find her already passed away. And I was able to help her find him in the other dimensions, and they turned around and waved at me and said goodbye, and I woke up and I knew that she had passed over, but I felt like she was coming to me to help her go through that transition. I've dreamt my nephew's birth before he was born, and I knew him on a soul level. I knew what he was going to look like. I knew his soul, and I was given a strong message that I would be raising him, and I was only 14 at the time, but I did end up raising him most of his life. And I dreamt my daughter went missing 3 weeks before she went missing. I dreamt that my dad got cancer, and in the dream, he came to me and he told me word for word, just gave me this whole description of what happened and how he had the paper in his pocket and he forgot that he was supposed to go back to the doctor, and months went by, and now it became, level 7, whatever. It was a very bad cancer, prostate cancer, and word for word. And I live in Vegas and he's in Utah, so I was trying to email him and call him. I was desperately calling him after the dream because I was very aware of my dreams and knowing what it meant, and I couldn't get a hold of him. And finally he emailed me back, and word for word in that dream he told me in a letter exactly what was told in my dream. So I've gotten to the point now where I've caught up with my dreams to where I pretty much dream the next day what's going to happen.
Now, I've only had a couple of what I would call prophetic dreams in my life. And one of them was, I've mentioned this on the show before, 2 days before 9/11. And but my dream was very symbolic and not exactly seeing things how they happen, but I dreamed I was standing on the banks of a river, and it was weird. It was like everything around me was like this red sand clay with no vegetation, but I knew that on the other side of the river was New York City, but I couldn't see it. And then all of a sudden, I saw 2 nuclear explosions side by side go off at the same time and going straight up. And you know how the mushroom cloud has the long stalks, like side by side, like the Twin Towers?
Yeah.
And then a few minutes later, I saw a third nuclear explosion down to the south. Well, I live in Jersey, and Washington is to the south of me. So I didn't put two and two together until like the day after 9/11. I didn't think of the dream. I didn't think anything about it. And then I'm watching some of the footage at night, and all of a sudden it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm going, oh, wow. But because it was so symbolic that, I didn't understand it, or I didn't understand that was like a warning or a prophetic dream that of a real event that was going to happen.
Wow.
Of course, a lot of this was back going on 20 years ago when I was a lot more involved in meditating and turning within and going on the spiritual. And unfortunately, the last couple of years, I've been so grounded in the physical with work and life stresses and whatnot. I'm trying to find a way to find my way back. And I find it really difficult to meditate. Or even on the shamanic side of it, they do the shamanic journeying and journeying to the different worlds, upper, middle, or lower world. Can't do it. I just fall asleep, or I just can't connect. I just feel like I'm in a holding pattern right now for some reason.
Yeah, maybe you're connected somehow to the Earth dimension. There's something you're holding on to here.
More than likely.
Needs a good clean up. Meditating. Do you do that at the same time every day in the same place like some people do?
Me? No, I
just
don't.
Do it whenever you feel it.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't have a real clear routine, especially at this time in my journey, just because I'm out of sorts myself in some regards, just from the last couple of years of going through this other journey. But usually I would have kind of a routine, at least, where I would wake up and go out, and I don't sit and meditate like a yogi. I just go out into nature and maybe do some gardening and that type of a thing, or sit in my patio and just take in the nature, and that's my form of meditation. I don't go to a yoga studio or anything like that.
Because I know some people, it becomes a ritual. It has to be in a certain place at a certain time of the day and for a certain length of time. And, and if they don't do that like that, then they get quite upset about it.
Yeah, to me that in some ways that can kind of take the spirit out of it, because the spirit's so free flowing, right? So if you get to where it has to be your way or a certain way, then I don't know. For me, it just doesn't work. But
see, I can't do it. I can't do it. I've done it. Okay, I will say I've done it when I was younger. But just recently, I think it's because there is, like Mark said, so much goes on in your life that you can't, you just don't get the time or whatever. And I've got to admit, I find it pretty boring when I do try. My mind drifts off, oh, what am I going to cook for dinner, this, that, and the other, It's very hard to get back to where I should be getting to do any meditation.
See, and I think I'm the opposite, where I can just be in a meditative state so often that I tend to neglect the earthly responsibilities and earthly dimensions, and it's an imbalance either way, because we have to be able to balance both. But I don't know. I've kind of gone the opposite end of the two of you guys on that regard, and it's really just as painful in some ways.
Well, I don't. How can I explain it? I go into daydreams, like they say, people go into daydreams, your mind goes blank when you're doing the washing up, or you're doing this, or you're doing that. Mm-hmm. And things start happening with me. That's when I cut off. I can still do things, I could tidy up the kitchen, I can make something, or I can't cook, so I can't really say I cook.
She burns water.
She cooks water.
My mind will be totally blank.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think when you're really starting to feel a lot of struggle or turmoil within yourself, that's your sign that you need to kind of go out and take some time in nature or do something that gets you back into a state of peace.
Mm. It rains all the time over here. The chance to do.
That's true. But, you got to follow the way that you feel. Because if you're feeling fine and you're not meditating, then you're probably okay. But if you're not feeling good and you're feeling a lot of turmoil going on inside of yourself, then you probably need to make that a priority. I would, because I've learned the hard way that if I don't put my spirit first, I suffer.
Yeah. No, it's only if I lay down and try to meditate, then I get all the crap coming in. But like I said, if I'm just not trying and I'm just doing other things, my mind just goes blank. Some people call it like a daydream. You just go blank and you just think automatically. Then I can pick up stuff, see stuff happening and one thing or another. And it goes into my mind, but it's like I just carry on doing what I'm doing. It's like I'm putting it into a filing cabinet to, work it all out later on when I've got time.
Well, and in a sense, that's almost better. I mean, I don't think you can get your pineal gland to expand. There's certain meditations you can do to get your pineal gland to open through meditation, and you have to silence all that noise that's coming in at you. But what you're doing is keeping yourself in a meditative state just through your daily rituals, which is fine. That's still meditation. It's just like I was saying, I don't really go to a yoga studio. I go outside and play in the garden, and it's meditation for me.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing, but I know there's other types of practices that you can do for different types of outcomes. I guess it just depends on what you're trying to achieve at that time. But it's like trying to diet. The more you think about it, the harder it is.
The more I think about it, the fatter I get.
I know, exactly. It's a mind F you know what.
Yeah.
It's a mind screw.
Okay. Right, out of body now. You go out of body. Do you ever come across any of this dark Irene, don't swear. Dark stuff when you're out of body, these dark astral critters and things like that trying to attack you or anything?
Well, not that much, but I have had a couple of experiences. One would be where one of my death experiences, I saw those hands grabbing at me, and I used to, when I was younger and less developed, I used to really attract a lot more dark entities, but partially that was because my mind was focusing on serial killers and things. I used to be so infatuated with them because of my childhood that I really needed to understand the way their mind worked, so I would read and study about them all the time, and then I would have spiritual experiences where I was feeling psychically attacked by entities that were of a darker nature. As far as coming out of body and seeing those beings, I've had out of body experiences where I traveled dimensions, and I saw that in the fourth dimension there were a lot of more negative entities, which would be what maybe the religions in our history have taught us about those that would possess you. So they no longer have a body anymore, or they did bad deeds so many times that they don't get a body anymore, and they stay in this dimension, and where they're at, they're still higher intelligence than humans to some degree, or at least humans don't tap into that intelligence. We have it, but we don't tap into it oftentimes. And because they have this higher intelligence and no body, they can feed on the soul or on the being that's on Earth, and so they do exist. I've seen them, and but when I've come out of body, I really haven't had trouble with them, mostly because I don't know why. I guess I just try to stay with Source, and I try to stay positive and stay in the light side of things. But I have seen them, and I know that they exist. There's a reason why these teachings have been around for so long, and maybe they're being interpreted by different people, but it's the same thing as that which could possess you.
Mm-hmm. What?
Now, with the connections that you have with some of these light beings, the information that comes through, do you ever feel like you've been downloaded with information, but you're not really consciously aware of what that information is?
Yeah, all the time. I have been downloaded with what I call light language, where I can feel them kind of working on my DNA, if you will. So they're the ones that activate me so that I can activate others, if you will. But I do feel that they speak to me through light language, which is a language that I understand on a soul level, but I don't know how to speak it in the physical form as a human. And they do give me messages, and sometimes I won't understand it at first until I integrate the energy of it, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Now, like I said, there are times where I'll come into some knowing of some things, like if I'm doing which I haven't done in a while, I need to get back into it, doing paranormal research, and I've investigated some locations, and I've had, if I sit quietly, I've graduated from using a lot of equipment like you see on a lot of the television shows to more going in and feeling the place myself and sitting quietly and picking up on whatever's there.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I do everything intuitively. I think you have so much knowledge built within you that you would be doing yourself a disservice to need anything outside of your own knowingness, right? If you're tuned in. I
still like using my digital recorder because I still like getting those EVPs when they come through.
Right, I get it.
But otherwise it's tapping into what is there. And if you're able to help it cross over, that's great. Or sometimes you find you're dealing with something that's not human. And again, it's people who listen to the show know I've talked about this before. Certain cases that I've worked on where there was definitely non-human entities attached to the land. And not necessarily evil, but definitely not good, and causing some turmoil with the families in those locations.
Interesting. I can believe it, but that's really interesting.
Where I live here in northern New Jersey, there are several hot spots within about 10, 20 miles of me, one just a couple of miles away. And I've lived in a couple of these areas that is there's just a hot bed of energy, and just things just keep happening in those areas. And it
sounds like a snake ranch. Have you ever heard of that? Is it Snakeskin Ranch or something like that?
Skinwalker Ranch.
Skinwalker Ranch. Okay, yeah. I know the guy that owns it now, and I've never been there yet, but it sounds similar. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
It's similar and yet not. It depends. I mean, with the Skinwalker Ranch, and then there's the other one, the Stardust Ranch down in Arizona, which we recently talked to John Edmonds, who owns that ranch, and the experiences he's had. Those areas are hotbeds of what I call high strangeness, which is a combination of everything you can think of, from aliens, UFOs, Bigfoot or cryptid-like creatures, portals opening, ghost-like phenomena happening, all happening in a concentrated area, where some of the places here that I'm experiencing is more along the lines of there's something living there. There's some types of energy in the area. It's not like they're experiencing all this other types of activity. It starts off seeming like it's ghost activity, but it really isn't. I would refer to it like in the UK, you have the Celtic fairy lore. Similar to that. Icelandic, they have the Elvish lore. Cherokee Nation has the little people. I mean, it's different types of multi-dimensional types of beings that come in and out of our world and can affect us. And some can do things mischievous. Some can be a little nasty, and can cause some havoc.
Yeah. Yep. Makes sense.
So when you work with people, I mean, how long have you been working directly with the public and doing your healing?
Well, I've been doing it for about 10 years. This last year, I really fully embraced setting up a YouTube channel and really just making it a full-time thing. But I've been doing it for about 10 years. privately. Now I'm kind of going public.
Have you thought about writing a book about your experiences?
I am in the process right now of writing a couple of them, yes.
Okay.
It's a journey in and of itself, so I'm kind of wobbling on it, but I'm working through it.
Well, with
nightmare writing a book, I tell you.
What's that?
It can be a nightmare writing a book.
Yeah, there's a lot of little blocks along the way, and I'm kind of fumbling my way through it. I've always known that I was meant to write books. Ever since I was a small child, I used to win awards for writing and stuff, and I've just, for some reason, it's one of those things I avoided about myself, but the spirit won't let me anymore.
Well, I've been blocked on the book I'm writing now. I've been blocked how long, Mark? Over a year?
More than that, almost like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Scott McCoon, I am so sorry. The book will be out. I will get there eventually. But
Right.
It's got to be a good couple of years. You know, it just happened one day. I was going lovely on it, absolutely lovely, and then suddenly, bang, blocked. And
I think sometimes maybe that's meant to be. I think, you know, when it's meant to happen, it's going to unfold perfectly. But I've noticed that if I would have written the books that I intended to write when I was 15, which is when I started my first book, it would have never sold. I would have never reached the masses because I hadn't evolved yet in my own soul enough, and I would have repelled certain people in my audience. So I've been refined over the years to where the stories that I have to say, I can express them in such a way that won't harm anybody in the process, if you will. I was too immature, you know. I would have said things and people would have been turned off and they would have missed my message.
Yeah, maybe that's right. I haven't got a message to say, but, you know, I've just got a block on, that's it. I'll get there. I will do it.
Well, we have to hear about the further exploits of Eileen Evans.
Yeah.
Right?
The psychic spy.
Yeah. Is she going to keep them on, or is she going to get them off?
Yep. Yeah, Irene wrote a novel a few years ago
This is the new book. Is The Spy in Paris.
Right. It's a sequel to The Psychic Spy.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, the Psychic Spy was her first novel that she published that about the remote viewing programs.
Oh,
yeah,
remote viewing programs. Wait, tell me about that.
Well,
it's a novel. It's a novel, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's like, you know, how the Americans had the what did they call it over here, Irene? You know, with oh God, who are those?
Stargate and all that.
Yeah, the Stargate project over here. The U.S. was using psychics to do psychic spying, and a lot of other countries were doing it around the world too. The Russians were really good at it. They took psychics more seriously than the U.S. did in working with them.
Yeah, they worked with the psychics in many ways besides remote viewing.
Interesting. Yeah, I've kind of looked into a little bit of that and heard some stories briefly, but that's kind of interesting. I'm surprised that the U.S. wasn't...
Well, in Russia, they rounded up a lot of psychics, all the psychics they could get hold of, and they were programming or trying to get them to stop. You know, what they wanted to do was if there was a battle or something like that, or a war, that these psychics would actually be able to stop it dead. It's hard to explain.
Interesting.
Yeah, literally totally mess up their enemy. You know,
so
into their heads and one thing or another.
So what happened at the end? Like, what was the outcome of that?
Oh, with I'm looking at you on that melon. With Eileen. Eileen, she's my heroine, isn't she? She ended up getting raped by the Russians and one thing. It's a novel.
Interesting.
Raped by the Russians and one. How did it end, Mark? I can't remember.
The end of the first book?
Yeah, where did we stop it so that I could take the next one on? I can't remember.
Well, do we want to give it away? We want people to buy it and read it.
Good point.
Yeah, she fled to Italy because the Russians were after. She was on a hit list and one thing or another. They took out a certain amount of Russians that actually found her in Italy. Then she was taken to France and held up in France for a while in a safe house before she came back to England. And when she came back to England, she just got deprogrammed and one thing or another. And the next thing, she's nabbed off the street by the Russians.
Stop giving away the rest of the plot of the book. People want to read the book.
He's a keeper.
What she done on a chair with this MI6 boyfriend of hers was unbelievable. And the chair
it was a rather sexy book in places. It had everything you'd expect from a good spy novel.
It's what I call the 3 S's. SIS. SIS is MI6. It's Secret, Sex and Spies.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to watch for that one then. Did you say that you wrote a book also?
Who, me?
Mark?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I've helped Irene edit her books and get them published. She's written 3 books so far, 2 novels and 1 her autobiography, Life Among the Spirits. So people, you could pick that up. Well, they're all available on Amazon.com, Kindle and paperback format. And then she's working on
my favorites, Demon's Dwell.
Yep, Demon's Dwell. Demon's Dwell. That was a lot of fun because I really got into the helping her on that one a little bit more with about taking place in the Amalfi Coast of all places because she loves Amalfi.
Mm.
Dealing with old cults, demonic possession, and solving a big mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I'm going to say about it because I'm not going to give away the plot like you do.
That's a whodunit. But
okay.
I've got 10 books in the go. Must get the spy book done first because Agent Scott McCoon is waiting for that one to come out. But there's one that I started to write and I really do want to get back into it. And that is about a demon that takes over a girl, but the whole story is from the demon's mind.
The demon's point of view.
Demon is the one telling the story.
Oh, that's very interesting.
How he will take her, he will dance with her, the demon dance, or he'd dance with her and he'd take her down, and all this is going on through his mind. But it's like trying to write that book, it's like, people will shout at me for this, but it's like I've got to get into the brain of a demon or into the mind of a demon, take the work forward, and it's...
it could be probably very wing.
Yeah, and people are going to be saying, now, Irene, be careful. Be careful, Irene, especially Sheila. She'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what you're messing with. Da-da-da-da.
I can relate to that for sure.
Mm.
I went to a Zach's museum out here. It's a haunted museum, and he's a pretty famous
Zach Baggins.
person.
Yep, I'm familiar.
Yeah.
I love his show, the Ghost Adventure Show. It's my guilty pleasure show.
Yeah.
Even though I watch the show and I look at half the things I'm doing, I shake my head and going, guys. But you know what? I love the guys on the show. Most ghost shows bore me to tears. It's as boring as whale shit. But that show, at least, the characters, the guys on the show, and how they film it and they do their cases is what's entertaining, and it's very entertaining. But I don't agree with a lot of their methods, but I also do think that they're one of the few shows that gets mostly legitimate evidence.
Mm-hmm. And I was just going to say the museum itself is 1,000,000% truly haunted. You can feel the energy from all of these, artifacts that have been in these types of events and stuff, and it's quite a heavy energy. So just going in there, it took me about 3 weeks to work that energy off of my system, and I'm usually pretty good at clearing myself within a day, within that day. But this time it was lingering, and it was very intense energy.
Yeah, well, he has a habit of collecting the darkest things for his museum, the most macabre, the things. They did a Halloween special there last year, I believe, and they brought in the Annabelle doll. You know how they made those movies, the Annabelle, the real Annabelle doll.
Her. Yeah, I saw her.
Yeah. And he touched it and caused the owner to freak out, and it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was one of those places. What's that?
When you saw it, did you feel anything from it?
I felt so much in that museum. I can't even describe it, because it wasn't just that doll that I was feeling things from. He has a collection in the same room that Annabelle doll is in. There's probably about 200 or more dolls just in that one room alone, and the whole museum is full of, beds where people were murdered by serial killers, and chairs that were, deaths, and stuff from Jeffrey Dahmer and stuff from Edward K. I mean, just there's so much going on in there that you feel it all at once, and it's pretty intense. But did I feel anything specifically from that doll? It would be hard to say, because that room was loaded with artifacts, and it was pretty gruesome. It was a very disturbing energy.
Yeah, there you go, Mark. That's where we send the ring.
Oh, hey, you know what? That actually may not be a bad idea. He might be interested in it.
Yeah, maybe he would, but he wouldn't give me anything for it, would he?
He might.
Don't want to sell it.
No. The ring we're talking about is Irene has in her possession. She acquired a long time ago a ring from Italy. That's shaped. You take one look at it. It looks like it's a demon's head, but with a long face and horns, and it has like ruby ingots for the eyes. But now we're not so sure. We've been doing a lot of research on it. We think it might be a representation of Pan, because it was found in Italy and Roman gods.
It's carved. It's handmade, carved from one nugget of silver. No joints in it or anything. It is old. She had the British Museum take a look at the pictures, and they think it could be up to 400 or 500 years old.
Wow.
Interesting. I asked them if they thought it might be Pan. I said, because I've been told it's a demon. Do you think it could be Pan? I'm hoping it'd be Pan. And they said, no, we don't think it'd be Pan. We think it is what you were told.
A demon.
But he's naughty. He's kept in the safe, and that's it. Occasionally I'll open the safe and he kind of jumps out. It sounds silly, doesn't it? But
no, there's
he jumps out with blood.
There's definitely something attached to the ring.
It doesn't fall. Right. It jumps across the room, so it goes over. So it's it's like somebody's in there and thrown it out.
Interesting. I'm not surprised by that. I know that energy is eternal, and so there's psychic imprints, right, on anything and everything that exists, really. And what those psychic imprints are probably very variable based on where it came from and all that. But
people that have seen it, they've told me that it's belonged to somebody very, very powerful at some time that's cast something into it. Practitioner that's cast something into it, and one thing or another. I call it Fred.
Fred.
But it does. I tell you what, the little bugger, excuse the language, does call to you. You could be sitting there thinking nothing about the ring, not even thought about it for months, and all of a sudden you have this strong urge to go and get it. And if you don't go and get it, it keeps on and on as if it's nagging you. You've got to go and get it.
Interesting.
And it does tighten up. It's too big for my fingers. But when I put it on, and you can actually feel it tightening around your finger. So it can fall off, and you can shake your hands about, and it will not come off.
Sounds like the One Ring.
Strange.
Well, actually, you know what? We have come to the end of the show. Surprisingly. Okay. So that went pretty quick. So
it did.
Before we go, Ellen, can you tell people where they can find you, how they get in touch with you?
Yes, absolutely. I'm on Facebook, and it's Ellen Redd, REDD. I have a couple different pages there. I'm also on Instagram and YouTube. You can just type in my name, Ellen REDD, and you'll find me any one of those places.
Fantastic. Well, Ellen, we want to thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. It's been fun talking with you, and we've learned a lot.
Yes, you as well. Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
So I want to thank everybody else for tuning in to another edition of the Paranormal UK radio show here on the Paranormal UK radio network. And what were you saying, Irene?
I'm just saying the Mickey. Oh, don't worry about it.
Well, and where can people hear us?
Everywhere, just everywhere, people.
All right. Well, everyone, you have a great evening, and we will talk to you next week. Take care now.
Bye.
Bye.